Okay, before the break, we were looking at Jupyter notebooks and some basic syntax things. That's sort of what the first assignment was. Since we just went over it in class tonight, I have a feeling everybody saw it before. A bunch of people have already turned that in. I will go ahead and push the due date on that first programming assignment back to Thursday. We don't want to push it back very far because then there's more homework assignments to do afterwards. So just a couple of days to give you a little more time, but yeah, I don't want to make it do 3 hours after we come to class. I'll keep you busy this evening. So give a couple more days on that if in case you haven't turned that in yet. Look at environment variables. Let's see. One other thing with notebooks I wanted to show before we close the notebook down for this evening. I'll go ahead and close PowerShell. I was doing the Get stuff in PowerShell last week. We'll talk about this in more detail soon, but I'm going to go ahead and do the GitHub stuff with a GUI. So the one I like is Smurge. This is Sublime Merge, made from that same people that make the text editor I like, so that our development tools use a GPU, and then the software we're developing is on the CPU, and it doesn't blend over in the when we take measurements and stuff. So a little GUI. You can see we have a bunch of information. There's not much going on here. We don't have multiple branches and stuff, but we have several commits. So we can stash stuff without seeing it. Submodules, we can go back to any earlier and see all the changes from earlier versions. Nicely color coded what we put in, what we took out. Take anything out yet, but I don't know what red and green most likely stand for without me explaining that. There's the earlier version. We have this latest with better log off. Got off for a second. And shows we have this latest version. I'm not expecting you to remember that. There are lots of Git GUI things. We have different ways to do it. We'll see it a few different ways. This is one I like. It says there's 4 untracked files. So it looks like we've done some stuff with notebooks. First called it untitled and then replaced it with the example. So I'm gonna get rid of that untitled one because we just named it correctly. Which then means the checkpoints, the auto-save background metadata along the way for untitled, we don't need that either. Confirm. So you can confirm. I'm only worried about those 2 files and then stage them. So whenever they put Git together, they used a lot of theatrical. So right now they're backstage. We can't see them. Can't see those files, but we're ready to change those. So stage the files, and now they're on the stage, right out there in front of the audience almost. And when we commit, that's like when the curtain goes up. And right once the audience can see the actors, there's no turning back. So they use that terminology on a lot of them. So ready to commit. Everything's staged. But here to commit 2 files. We're down, there's some options we can change previous commits. So not restricted to only changing the current version of our files. We can go back to earlier versions. That's getting into GitHub stuff. We won't see that too much. Whoops, I didn't mean to click that, but I just accidentally clicked my username and email address there, and it pulled up the edit box. But you don't know what working with GUIs is kind of nice. So we'll go ahead and commit these, and we need to enter a message. So this is first notebook example. We can do, yeah, I'll just do a short message. We're not digging into Git stuff here. Then I commit again, and you see our little tree, which is just a straight line right now. We don't have any alternate branches. We don't have any parallel versions of this software. Has all of that there, and under remote, and see here somewhere there should be a web address. Oh, well, it's right here. this one up arrow, we're one commit ahead of the remote one on GitHub.com. So I need to push these up, which where's push button? Down here, or over here. Our up arrow and big up arrow and down arrow. Pull, which runs pulls the remote stuff, the stuff that's on GitHub that we don't have locally. Or push, which sends this back to GitHub. I'm going to click push. You see it's pushing to origin main, finished, and now if we go to GitHub, we should see all that stuff. That's the GUI I like. There are lots of them out there, or anything in this class, you can just use the website buttons. Those will work fine. But if I look for that SDEV 220, 220, or spring 2024, this one, you see that notebook is right on there, pushed up there 1 minute ago. So everything's connected, and we have like local software we can use. We don't necessarily have to use the kernel. And this is what I wanted to look at. Notice GitHub knows what a notebook is. So we can easily preview that. Not just that, for those who are using VS Code, if I go to github.dev, which is started as the same open source project, but they put a little bit more time into customizing it. Notice that this thing that is closely related to VS Code recognizes a notebook as well. So for VS Code users, VS Code does know what a notebook is. No problem there. Or if you're a VS Code user, notice that it's on GitHub, and GitHub is owned by Microsoft. So while this one is extended beyond, has extra functionality that didn't go in the original VS Code, they are both Microsoft products. So you will be very, very familiar with that one if you just want to do your editing there. But it knows what it is. So let me go back here. I can close that. That's probably enough. But you see, we have GUI applications. There's also one that came with it. Git GUI. When we downloaded Git, we also get Git Bash, so that we have a Bash terminal to run a Windows machine, or Git command. So we have the traditional Windows command prompt to run a Linux or Mac machine if you want those for some reason, or a little GUI that comes with it, which has some nice functionality. We'll look at that at some point.
What do I think my dad's Atkins commercials? Well,
what was that, Samantha?
Sorry.
Oh, she's not muted. Okay. That's why you were across the room talking. Yeah, I heard something and I couldn't quite make it out, but I guess you were not by the microphone is why. So there's that's one I like, and it ties into the text editor I like as well. But certainly not the only one. Might as well point at the best one since I'm talking about Git GUI applications. Git Kraken is probably the best one, but you'll get like 30 days free with this one. But it is really, really nice. So if you want to play around with that for 30 days to see what it's like, and again, when you're out there making good money, then this software would be a business expense come tax season for every country in the world. So that part can be kind of nice. I'm going to jump back over to Spider IDE next, but as long as you have some place to type code and run it, it'll be fine. Again, I recommend trying different ones at this level. So I'm going to use Spider probably most often, but whichever one you use will be fine. Oh, okay. I had not looked at that. Angela put in the chat room that Git Kraken is, you can get a student license for it. So you can use it for free when you're a student, and when you're out there making 150, 175,000 a year, then you can pay for it and get a write-off on your taxes for it. So I'm going to jump in Spider, make a little project here. Actually, we're going to look at some other, a couple useful modules. Oh, we didn't look at functions yet. Functions are next week, aren't they? Let me check the schedule. One of the things I was thinking we would look at is a disassembler, but that has to do with functions. So we might need to wait till next week to look at that. I don't want to jump too far ahead. Let me see what's in module. Let me check our to-do list. Look at some other ones. And I also want to make sure there's plenty of time tonight. So our break was actually past the halfway point I was planning. So that way there's plenty of time to do stuff. It's an active subject, right? We'll talk about this stuff and I'll do diagrams on the board explaining what's going on. But really, we learned the most from writing code, seeing error messages, figuring out what's wrong, and then fixing those error messages. So we want to make sure there's plenty of time every night to actively do stuff. This is an active subject. Modules. So module 1's kind of finishing. I'll push the due date back on that first programming assignment. But I think most people have turned that in already. Module 2 is if and while, some of that stuff, and getting started in command line. We've seen some of that. Just kind of follow along the tutorial, take some screenshots. But that's just, this one is basically making sure you know how to use the terminal. Yeah, so we'll look at disassembler next week because we need to see functions before we get to that. If else while, we talked about that some. And for loops kind of go in there. Command line, we've been looking at that along the way, but I guess real quick, we should see some of those general changes. There's going to be different ones. Some things are consistent, some things are platform independent. But your basic navigation, all the stuff that you're used to doing with a mouse, because of what we'll be doing most of this semester. This week, there's assignment doing that. So like change directory, CD, which is actually different on a Linux and a Mac versus Windows. On Linux and a Mac, that is a function that means change directory. And on Windows, it's a variable that means current directory. So on Windows, that's also how we ask for it. If we type CD, it tells us what the current directory is. But on Windows and Mac, or Linux and Mac, it's a function. Same abbreviation. All you really need to know there is CD is how you change directory. So change directory to C drive, users folder, and things are space delimited in terminals. So if you have spaces in your folder name, you have to have quote marks. So probably a good habit of just getting in the habit of putting quote marks around your addresses and stuff. To avoid, watch out for spaces. The Frank user, Linux and Mac use the /, Windows uses the / for directories. Actually, Windows will use both. Windows will use both of them. User /Frank /documents /delete folder, and change over to the one we're working in. List things out. ls is actually the Linux command. It's one of the nice things about PowerShell. It knows some Linux commands and the old, as well as the old command prompt commands. And then it has its own, which is a modern language. Back in the day, RAM was kind of a precious commodity, and we certainly didn't want to waste it on computer experts. That's why everything's abbreviated. So one of the big changes with PowerShell was spelling things out, and they used a strict convention with getters and setters, and some strict naming conventions. So once you start seeing the pattern, it's really easy to figure out. But this isn't a PowerShell course. But not remove. Get child item. Right. So we're in this directory. Means everything in this directory is a child of this. So we want to grab all those, and the PowerShell syntax is spelled out, and if I hit enter, it's see how we have multiple ways to do the same thing. It's one of the nice ones about PowerShell. We can mix and match and choose which one we use, all that. And copy stuff. So copy day -2 -example. Doesn't know what it couldn't copy it here because it's already here, so copying it here would cause a problem. So maybe if I do copy day -2 -example, this was from the SDEV 153 class earlier this afternoon. // to go up to the parent directory. That let me copy it. So CD dot always means the current directory. So dot is the parent. So CD dot / goes up a directory. And if I list stuff out, you see now we have a copy of that thing. So it's stuff like that, copying things around, making new files. Easiest way to do that is have your text editor do it. So if I wanted to create a Python script, I would probably go Sublime, say hi.py, and have the text editor create that for me. And then open in the text editor. That's obviously optional. Print hello world. Save that, close it, and then run it. Have the Python interpreter look at say hi.py and do all that stuff. There's multiple ways, touch and echo stuff to files, multiple ways to make new items, but just make sure you know how to do all that, some of the stuff that you're used to doing with the mouse in a terminal. Everything that can be done with a mouse on the GUI can be done with a terminal in the background and more, because there's a lot of functionality that we don't want the typical user to have. The average user that might not necessarily know what they're doing can easily destroy the computer with some of that functionality. So we want to reserve certain things are reserved for computer experts, so they don't make it onto the graphical user interfaces. They're only available through the terminal. So that assignment is just use some basic functionality, take a screenshot to show that you can change directory, make new folders, add files to them, move files, delete files, copy files, all the basic file handling with that before we get into Django stuff. I believe the module after next, but we'll probably start doing it in class sooner than that and get previews on that, because I'm not a super big fan of the tutorial that's there. I'm going to talk about this real quick. I guess we're still early enough in the semester we can call it preview mode. Sometimes I don't like to drift too far from the standard statewide shells. In this particular one, even when I teach this online, I often make a lot of changes. I teach it for Ivy Online, I still make a lot of changes, because this tutorial that we will get into in module 4, I believe. Yes. Django introduction starts here. In module 4, we go to this Django Girls tutorial, and this is a comprehensive tutorial. But we're just introducing Django in this class, right? We only have 8 weeks. We don't need the comprehensive version. So we'll be making some changes, and the expectations for your final project will match what we do in class. But obviously, I did not want to delete the links to the comprehensive tutorial if you have time to sit down and go through them, but it can be a bit overwhelming. It often is in online classes, and it shows way more than what the final project expectation is. So we'll be covering stuff in class, but really, we don't need a full comprehensive tutorial of Django. We just need introduced to Django at this level, right? And then you can do the full comprehensive version later along the way, stretched out over time. So it's there. The assignments will reference it. but each week I will kind of I will modify those assignments to cover what we did in class, which is what I feel is the more important introductory concepts for Django instead of the full comprehensive version, because that's a bit too much right out of the gate. We learn the full version later because we have a lot of stuff to look at besides Django too. So if you're one of those people that likes to work ahead on those Django projects, check with me when you get there, or work ahead on the other stuff and wait on those until we get to them in class, because they will be edited slightly depending on the coverage we give them in class. Which everybody's logging on to the Zoom call, and I'm not catching people's personnel interest. But I do add, I do leave wiggle room in my plans for the semester, so that as I pick up on different people's personal interests, right? Like from those introductory discussion boards, I know some people are heading towards software development specifically, and some people are data analysis. I will make little adjustments that kind of fit with your goals as far as I know. I like to try and do that because that's the part you need from Python, and we've got a little bit of wiggle room, so we can might as well cover the parts that y'all are interested in specifically as we go on. Let's see, 8 o'clock. So let's look at a couple of modules. Let's do stuff here. Print. Hello world. Looks good, except that no matter what I print, it's always going to be that color, right? Basic output color. So that's one of the useful modules I like to look at. The color module in Python. And we will look at a disassembler next week. I put that on the list, but I might have jumped the gun a little bit. I was looking for a color module in Python. There it is. Oh, color, the one with the U. So this module, if you use a bash, a Linux or a Mac user, this is the color coding you use on your terminal. So you might know some of the things. So installation, no surprises there. And then we have a few different examples that say what color to use. There's some names, text colors. They've updated this since the last time I looked at it. There used to be an example right here near the top that was the one I was looking for, but I don't see it here now. Where's the example I was looking for? Easy to follow, but you can see we have different colors here, and we can do backgrounds and things like that. When do we start finding new colors? That's what that is. Maybe this isn't the one I was thinking of. What's color? Is this the one I was thinking of? This is the one I was thinking of. Sorry, I went to the wrong module. The colored module. So we want to do pip install colored. And if anybody's a Linux user, you probably recognize that color right there. Others maybe not so much. Then we have things, what's that print formatted string, like we saw earlier, for foreground.white, background.green. A nice easy way to get those colors in there. Yeah, that's the one I was looking at. I'll leave that example open. We want to install that. So if you got Spider set up with the like we looked at last week, should be seeing the latest version. By default, it comes with 3.8. So if you start a new console and see 3.8 here instead of 3.12 or 3.11, depending on which version, if you already had it, instead of the version of Python you normally use or recently installed, you might want to do this over in terminal. We can run terminal commands from here, so I can say pip install colored. That was what it was, right? Pip install colored, yeah. Do that right from here. Grabbed all of it, successfully installed it. I'll restart the console. I don't think I have to actually expire, but I will right into that anyway. But you've run that line, and if you're in the terminal, like you couldn't get Spider Sync with it or something, you can go to terminal. Oops. I for terminal. You can just run that line here, right? Hit install colored, which just installed anyways, and then go into the Python terminal and just do the stuff right here to follow along. As long as you have some place to type Python code and some place to run Python code for examples. Actually, I like to do that in class, or like when switching up IDEs, and it really helps to show that y'all can understand what's going on. If I'm writing, like if I'm doing it in Spider and you're doing it in VS Code, the same thing is working the same, then that shows understanding. But it's good to check different things. So now that we have that, we could put up a line here. So like print hello world, just our basic one. But we want to do that in that example. So import colored. Oh, which we haven't seen this. Under the tools, there's oh, maybe not tools. Under source, run code analysis. Save this somewhere, documents. Delete, go to thing. This is a random example. Free.py. Runs code analysis, looks at what's wrong with the code. So naming conventions, oh, I got trailing new lines, so I got extra white space at the end. So things about refactoring. We can get all those messages. It's not just a little symbol over in the lines. We can do full analysis on most IDEs. So when you're choosing an IDE, make sure that you can run code analysis and get all those recommendations, like if it doesn't like your variable names, things like that. Doesn't conform to snake case. I don't have any variable names, but it's already telling me that I'm not matching the snake case. That's all lowercase with underscores. It's called snake case. That's the recommendation for Python, but y'all have probably noticed that nobody's really consistent in Python. So there's naming conventions all over the place. But it goes through and checks all of that and sets things up for refactoring. It means cleaning up your code, making it look nice afterwards. So now that we have that, well, we can do what that example showed. Instead of just printing that word, we can use red, foreground, background, style.reset obviously goes back to the beginning. Mostly we're going to want foreground and background. There's other things we can do. And if you recognize those color codes, if you're a Linux user, some Mac users might know them. There's your full color codes, the 30s, the 150s, all of that. But it's going to know your basic colors, red, yellow, green, cyan, blue, all of that stuff. So you can just use the words. That's probably a good start. Google Linux color codes if you want to learn that deeper one. Linux color codes. We're not going to dig into them super deep. They're not actually Linux color codes, but that's where most people know them from. So if you search for Linux color codes, you'll get tons of blogs with nice explanations on them. In the long run, something useful for software developers, but that would take us off track when we can just use the words green and red and blue and all of that. So we could say print, or we can do it like their example here. put that in there, did they? For colored dot for, and then the name of the color. Predictive text pull anything up? Nope. Wait, why is that different than their example? For dot red. Oh. Colored dot for dot green. See if this works. I don't think this is the right syntax, but the general process. Give that a save, get run. I don't quite know what that is. Function object has no attribute green. Oh, wait. Should be in uppercase letters. Let me try that. Nope, green's not a valid color. Oh, all lowercase. You all know the process for this stuff, right? Try putting that in all lowercase. There we go. It didn't actually change it there. So that's why we need to do it in those formatted strings. So we'll make that F. And then just like the example shows here, I like to do it this way, especially at the beginning, because this is what y'all are going to end up doing when you're doing your homework, right? You're not going to just remember everything I said in the lecture. Looking at the example, so inside our string, we need angle brackets, and we'll say colored dot for dot green, which is slightly different than their example because they did import or from color import everything so that we have that. But I use with class examples, I like to use this notation. So usually when I'm writing my code, I use the other notation, like from the colored module import for, and then we don't need colored dot for, we can just say for. I usually put that in the code, but as far as class examples, I think the long spelled out notation makes it a little bit clearer to see where that's coming from. But again, back to that alternate syntax thing we had. So we can put that there, green on hello, and colored dot foreground dot cyan. And add some color into it, do some backgrounds, print an F string with the colored library background dot yellow, and then colored dot back or dot for dot black. Here's a B thing. Hopefully, give that a run. Oh, it didn't know what yellow was. Got a red and black. Yellow seems like a basic color. I don't know why that one's not included. We go over here and look. Should be a list, but they don't seem to have a list here. Right? Predictive text can come in there handy if you're on an IDE that has predictive text. So like the color module, the background, dot, and RGB, so we can make a new color. I was expecting some predictive things here. If we scroll down, should see some color names. I don't see any color names. I don't see what I was expecting. I was expecting color names there, but it shows an RGB. What are the references they have? They have yellowed on their page, so it worked on yours. Okay, for some reason yellow did not work on mine. Did I spell yellow? Back up. Yellow. You know, space between those. that line. Yeah, that's definitely not red, not yellow. You can try different colored names, see what's there. Should be able to pull up a list if it has no idea what it is. I'm just gonna go to red because that's showing. Yeah, yellow should have worked. I don't know why it didn't. What's in the chat room? Could it be the dark meaning of the console? It could be. I'll switch to yellow, which is a color that should be there. And maybe I'll go over to where this is at, documents, delete file, our repository, and I'll open PowerShell in this folder and run it from here. What I'll call it? Random example 3. So I have the Python interpreter, random example 3.py. Yellow works there. And notice how it kept going. It finished the Python code, went back to PowerShell, and made PowerShell yellow. So color codes transfer through like that. So make sure you do that style.reset. Style.reset. Oh, whoops. Color.style.reset unless you use that other syntax that looks a little bit nicer. Now if I go and run that from PowerShell, save it. Don't notice any change right here in the IDE, but if I go back over to PowerShell and run that, it made everything yellow. That's the wrong word. Let me take the reference material. Style.reset. Now maybe I should just do it like they did instead of putting it in a random spot. Cut that and add it into that formatted string because it doesn't give us an error outside of there. But something definitely seems off. Run that, looks the same here. I come up here and hit up to run the last command. That time it reset. There we go. So little things like that. You all know the process, right? Some back and forth, play around. Sometimes we might not see something in documentation, but we can look at enough of the documentation to start taking guesses. And obviously don't burn up all of your time taking guesses, but that's the better way to build intuition. You'll build a lot more intuition for the programming language and modules that you have it to work with in it by taking a few guesses off limited resources than watching tutorials about all those things, because that's just blanket memorization. And the intuition will go a lot further. Colors can be really, really useful. I'm gonna come back over here. Another module we want, actually, I should probably open Spider again, or PowerShell. Go back to terminal. A really useful one, pip install TQDM, which is not an acronym, right? When it downloads, see how we have these meters? That's what TQDM is. So let me open that up here. Again, go check the documentation on it. TQDM on Python. Check the PyPy site, PyPool site, however you want to pronounce that. And it's a shorthand to TATM. It's not an acronym, it's an abbreviation, which is Arabic for progress. But it's a progress meter, so we can do things in it. That's important now. So let me go back up to IDE and I'll import TQDM, which really has one function in it that we're worried about, which is also called TQDM. So the TQDM module has a function called TQDM. So let's say we saw for loops. So for I in TQDM dot TQDM, or use that from TQM import, whatever syntax, and then you don't need the multiple ones. We'll do the range of say 100. It's just a little addition to our thing. Maybe also import time. That way we can see it move, because to count up to 100, we won't really see the meter go do anything. I'll increment a counter. Counter equals 0. Reach down through our loop. Counter. Okay, what do we get if we add the first 100 numbers together? We add the first 100 integers, 0 to 99 together. Anybody know? We'll see pretty quick. And then for our, I think I would be right. 49. Yes. Yeah, if we went 0 to 1 to 100, that's well known as 50 plus 50, one more than half. But
And in doing this one,
0 to 99 is a little bit different. So yes, there's a formula for it, if you heard today say that. Oh yeah, then I imported time, so let's do time dot sleep. Usually I don't put things to sleep. I'll take a measurement of time and then just keep checking in an if statement if a certain amount of time's passed, because telling your computer to stop processing can be dangerous at times. Just as dangerous as like entering an infinite loop and telling it to keep processing. So I usually do measurements, but I'll just do it a simple one here, 0. So we'll sleep for 1/10 of a second. And that way we can see the meter do something. And then afterwards, we'll print out whatever count is. Should see the meter do something. There we go. So that can be really, really useful, especially for those of you all in the data analytics, that are data analysts, or heading down data analyst pathway, because in our modern world, we have some very, very, very large data sets. So you might want to set up a meter running as you process those data sets, so that you know how much time it's going to be. Right? We have big data sets, like we have things that you'll not just go get lunch, you'll leave for the day and come back a couple days later before it's finished, right?
10 seconds.
Yeah, and we have all those statistics and stuff, right? We go get lunch, come back, we see how long it ran. Printed it out. 49.50 is what you said, right? N times n plus 1, so 99 times 100 divided by 2. If you didn't know that formula. Yeah, so that's a very, very useful one. And notice how we just wrapped our range generator in that. That's in our next lesson. Next lesson, we'll talk about generators and comprehensions. Very, very useful things. But we just wrapped our generator in that, and it built the meter. So like downloading something that it can predict how long it's going to be, right? Check the file size before we download something, and then just track how long it is. But anything where we might want a meter, for those of y'all in the data analytics program, you will definitely want some meters, because right, there are massive data sets in the world. Amazon's data set probably went up by 1 billion records in the last 3 or 4 seconds, and has been doing that for decades and decades and decades. So it takes a while if we want to process that entire data set. Process everything on Facebook. One of the posters in the back of the room has Mark Zuckerberg's picture on it. That popped in my mind. Give it a nice cushy government job. Process IRS data that's been stored digitally, which would go back all the way back to 1959, right? It's a lot of tax data. Takes a minute to get through that, even with big, powerful machines. Which is why NVIDIA has started making the DPUs. All of NVIDIA's 5-year plans involve CPUs, DPUs, and DPUs, data processing units, so that we can optimize optimize the use of each type of processor. And they want to put all 3 of them in basically every machine moving forward, within the next 5 years, which will be kind of nice. But from software development and data analytics perspectives, the two groups that are mostly taking this class, that's going to be a big deal, right? Once all our machines have CPUs, GPUs, and DPUs, or data processing units, there's going to be some modifications to how we write our code, because we want to get the best out of all three of them. Those are a couple of useful modules. Might want to play around with, make your output look a little bit nicer, because we can do color code stuff and throw in emojis, and then it's going to look a lot better than just plain words on a black screen. Do some meters to see how long something's gonna take, but frankly, for our classroom, we kind of have to work in a delay if we want to actually see the meter doing anything. So I just imported the time module, and then time.sleep stops it. You can also do like time dot. What I normally would do is check for the current time, and then every time through the loop, check again. And after a certain amount of time has passed, then we're done. Then we go into an if statement or something. We just keep checking every millisecond, and after say 300 milliseconds have passed, then that's the amount of time we want. Or in the case here, like 100 milliseconds have passed. And that way our computer never stops processing. It continues doing something, but for now, we'll see that later. For now, we can just put it to sleep. Yeah, that looks good for example number 3. Does anybody have any questions about those modules? And like I said earlier, consider your homework assignment the bare minimum, right? Most everybody that gets to this class is heading down a pathway where you're going to take Python seriously. So feel free to do more. I pretty much always try to show more than I test you on. And say that when we don't have any actual tests. But I will show more than I grade you on. So feel free to do more. That's always acceptable. And even if you go beyond, feel free to send me those questions. I've been using Python for a little while. First time I saw Python was 2006, I think. I remember which computer it was on. Somewhere around 2007 to 2005. So I'm going to average that and say it was in 2006. That was the first time I saw Python. I've been first learned to program a little bit before that. But I've been using Python for quite a while. So depending on what your interests are, if you want to take stuff further, take your studies further, because you know Python's going to be useful for your career goals, feel free to do that, and feel free to send me those questions. You don't have to restrict questions to homework, and you don't have to restrict homework output to those precise instructions, right? We've seen how to do colors and meters and emojis, so you can make your outputs look a lot better now. Just console outputs. We haven't even got to any GUI outputs. We'll see. We'll be putting our GUIs on our GUI is going to be HTML, basically. It's going to be a web application. So by the end of the semester, we'll be doing outputs that we can style with cascading style sheets if anybody's seen CSS. And for that, we basically have no restrictions on how we do stuff. If you haven't seen the internal workings of that, CSS is half of a C++ program, and the other half is built into your browser. So we basically have no restrictions on how we style stuff once we can make our output styled with CSS. Time restrictions. Time is a restriction. Other than that, yeah, we're not limited on it. Okay, that brings us up to 8:25. That was the time I was looking for. Let's go put this stuff on GitHub. I used that GUI last time, so I'm gonna go to the terminal one again. Here's the repository stored locally. So I'll go to the address bar and start PowerShell in this directory. And if you're on a Mac, if you're on a Linux user, you're already in your bash terminal. Not even in it, probably not even using Explorer unless you have Ranger or something. Or something like it. Ranger is by far my favorite one to use a bash terminal, but Linux users are already in your terminal. If you're on a Mac, down at the bottom, there's breadcrumbs. Just depending on how many buttons you have on your mouse, either right click or long click on the folder name, and there is an option to open in terminal. If you don't see the breadcrumbs at the bottom, just hold down the option key and they'll show up. For Windows, put it in the address bar. And if it's on those environment variables like we saw at the beginning of the night, then your operating system knows about it. So the operating system already knows where the address of where PowerShell is located at. Which that sort of stuff, location and objective, that's like task-oriented programming is the term for that. Right? We're studying mostly object-oriented programming, but we're referring to the others. HTML is service-oriented programming. The service of encoding text, encoding textual data. This is service-oriented programming, and this sort of stuff. Go to this location and carry out this task. Right? So we want to go to this directory, this location, and carry out this task. Get, add, dot. So look at the current directory and stage all the files that are not already included or that have not already been committed to. Now go to this location and carry out this task. Get, commit, give it a message of winding down on day 2. One. That's task-oriented programming. That stuff is tedious and repetitive and as boring as it gets, right? So, but it's also super easy to automate. And as software developers, we're the ones that have to automate it from time to time. We will see how to do that later when we make installers and all that stuff. All right, so we've committed those changes. We can check the history of it, right? Get log. Those bullet full log, see all the commits, we're currently here. Done all that, see all the changes. More than a page's worth, so I'm just going to type Q to go ahead and exit that. Lots and lots of different things we can do, but we just need the basics. We'll use add to check for any changes since the last thing, right? Get diff. Get log -- one line. I'm going to grab this one, control copy, and do get the difference between this commit and our second commit. Is that? So here's all the things that have changed since our second commit, which it started in that some JSON. So that's our notebook from earlier tonight. We added that, and then if I start scrolling down, it's going to go on for a long, long ways. But a whole bunch of additions here, right? A whole bunch of things have been added since that earlier commit. But we can see all that right here. All that stuff that we have on that GUI that I pulled up earlier, or that web interface on github.com, all of that comes from Git. All of the functionality is there, and all we did was put better graphics to it. So we can do it all in the terminal if you want. It was made by Linus Torvalds for making Linux. So it is a terminal application, and it's just been extended a lot further. The recent one I made, I thought that would make a good VR application. So I've been working on one where for like boxes. So there's a big desk. So with VR, your commits are each in a different box. So if you want to look at different stuff, you pick up a box and put it on the thing, and then that runs all that. Switch to an earlier commit or change which version of the software you're looking at and stuff. I was trying to come up with a VR thing that would be kind of fun. That was what I was like, version control might be really good in VR. Put it in boxes and shelves and stuff like that. But sorry, got sidetracked. I get sidetracked easily. That's why the lectures start off slow, so y'all can get used to me before we get to the really interesting things. So we committed those changes, did all the other stuff we want to do. And the big one we want to do now is, now that we have those changes, we want to push that back to the origin. And on mine, it's on the main branch. So you might want to do get branch. Make sure you know which branch you're on. We got multiple branches. We haven't seen that yet. That's like parallel versions, where every commit along the way, we have different versions all the way along the way, and make a full tree instead of just version after version after version that all build on themselves. We can have versions that build from different points along the way and do different things. And get a picture that looks like a tree. So I have on the main branch, but you might have a master branch, or you might have give it some other name. Whichever one it is, we want to push that back to our remote origin. So git push origin, and then the branch name we want to put it on. Or we can create a new branch here. We'll see that soon. I'm just going to use the one that exists. And uploads all that, no error message. Four changes were made, so those all got pushed back up. Resolving all the changes, all of that stuff. And if we go to GitHub, we should see those latest changes. Usually we won't be going to GitHub after we push it back up. I just want to do this SDEV 220, and we're in 2024. So here's that random example from a few minutes ago, all those changes. No surprises there. Usually we'll stop looking at GitHub before long unless we use the GitHub, unless we're using the GitHub interface to upload files. But lots of ways to do things. And one thing that I would recommend at this level especially is try some of those other ways. See which ones you like, which ones you don't like, right? Use GitHub in terminal, or this one that I was using earlier, that's Sublime Merge. It's open source. You can use it forever for free, and up here in the middle it says unlicensed version or unregistered version, but you're allowed to use it forever for free on the BSD license, which means you can charge people money with what you make for it. And it's completely open, but it's paid for so that it falls in that business expense one whenever it's beneficial for you to have a business expense with those. That's the one I use. Git Kraken is probably the nicest one as far as desktop applications. GitHub also has a desktop application. There is a GitHub desktop. This one will very much match the window, what you see on the web interface. There's that. Git Kraken, which is the best software, and they have the most awesome mascot too. Where's the mascot? They do have a Kraken for a mascot, a little animal. Oh, yes. Somewhere, I thought I saw it.
Up there, on the right. Top right.
Oh, yes. Oh, there's an animated version. So they have the short logo, and then there's a little animated character that plays whenever things are running. It's like a progress bar or splash screen. This is probably the nicest one. Most powerful. Tower is really nice too. Git Tower. This is another really nice one. There's lots and lots of them out there. I'll probably be using Sublime Merge. But at this level, it's a great place to try different things, different syntax on Python, see which ones you prefer, which ones make the most sense in your mind. Different IDEs to write your code in, see which one you like the best. Or I guess more importantly is which ones you don't like. So then if you ever see those features in an IDE, you know to avoid that IDE because it has stuff that you don't like in it. That's probably better to keep track of than keeping track of the stuff you do like. And different sorts of applications to work with GUI. You also have Git GUI that downloaded that. Sorry, different applications to work with Git. So there's also a Git GUI, the default one that downloaded with Git. Any questions from this evening? I'll give 5 seconds so that people have time to unmute. Reach the Zoom button to unmute.
Yeah, Professor, I have one quick one. The
Yes.
the numbers and types assignment, it says utilize the Jupyter notebook, but we can use our IEDs that like Spider and VS Code is the one we wanted.
Yes. Use whichever IDE you want.
Just wanted to make sure. Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Yes.
I was going through the steps and everything like that.
Okay. The big thing I will go ahead and note on that, the due date's going to be pushed back to Thursday, but do take note that there is a writing prompt question in that assignment. So there's a bunch with writing code, and then they ask you a yes or no question, or they ask you a question at the end. So there is a writing prompt. Don't skip the writing prompt questions. Those are worth points, so that relates to understanding, but the numbers and types. At the end, it says, was 3, 5, and 3, 6 the same? Did it give the same answer? You're supposed to answer that question. Because usually I wait till after submitting that and it takes points off, but I'm a pretty laid back person and that came up, so I thought I'd just go ahead and mention that. Don't skip the writing prompts. There are some of those to show understanding of the code we're writing. Great question, Nathan. Yeah, use whichever one you want. The only ultimate restriction is when we get to automated testing, we cannot use a notebook. That has to be done in a text editor or IDE. But otherwise, experiment between the two and kind of get used to both because you'll probably use both in your careers. Okay, any other questions? I gave it a few seconds, so there's time to unmute. If you have any, let me know. I'm going to turn my phone up because the other day, I forgot to turn my phone up and I didn't hear a message until we left. Some people we were here till 10 o'clock that night. So I'll turn my phone up. Text messages and Ivy Learn messages are the only two things that make noise on my phone. That's the quickest way to get a hold of me. I'm just going to be sitting around waiting for messages until 9:50. Please use our time productively. And remember, if you're exhausted and trying to push through it, you'll be less productive than if you would have rested when you need it. So I do count rest as productive. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll see you on Wednesday. Have a great one.